The controversial Common Core curriculum is being adopted by many Catholic schools in the U.S. What is the Common Core? Who's pushing it? And how could it affect Catholic education? Patrick Reilly of the Cardinal Newman Society and Professor Anthony Esolen of Providence College are here to discuss. And he's hosted the #1 show in cable news for 17 years. Author of the worldwide bestseller, Killing Jesus, Bill O'Reilly joins us in an exclusive interview. And in our Unseen Hero segment, the mother of poet and peace activist Mattie Stepanek, Dr. Jeni Stepanek, joins us to talk about overcoming disability and coping with loss. The World Over Live begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. The show is so big this week we could have had two. Bill O'Reilly, Anthony Esolen, Patrick Reilly, and Jeni Stepanek are all straight ahead, and in our Cut to the Chase segment, I'll comment on those recent reports of Vatican polls and the coming of female cardinals. As always, if you have a question or a comment about tonight's show, tweet them to Raymond Arroyo or drop us an email at worldover@EWTN.com. Lots to get to, but first, here's the brief. News from the world over this week. An horrific discovery in Syria as the bodies of 45 Christians were found in the west-central town of Saadad. They were reportedly slaughtered by Islamic rebels who overran the town on October 21st. Government forces recaptured Saadad a week later. The bodies of 30, including women and children, were found in 2 mass graves. 30 people were wounded. Another 10 are still missing. Orthodox Archbishop Silvanos Boutros Alneme told Fides News that the innocent civilians were martyred for no reason, and that other civilians were threatened and terrorized. Homes have been destroyed and churches damaged and desecrated. The Archbishop sadly noted that it was the largest single massacre of Christians in Syria ever. Meanwhile, residents of the Apostolic Nunciature in Damascus were hit with mortar fire on Tuesday. There were no casualties. A single shell exploded on the 3rd floor of the Nunciature, where the papal representative, Archbishop Mario Zanotti, has his quarters. Vatican spokesman Father Federico Lombardi confirmed the attack at a press conference in Rome.
There were material damages and not damage for the people, for the persons. It is due also to the time of this accident, because it was early in the morning. If it would be later on, it would be much more dangerous.
Father Lombardi added that it was not known if the Nunciature was intentionally targeted. The state-run Syrian news agency attributed the attack to rebels. Back here in the United States, after a landslide re-election on Tuesday, New Jersey Governor Chris Christie appears to be on his way to being one of the front-runners for the 2016 presidential elections. The combative GOP incumbent defeated Democrat Barbara Buono by more than 20 percentage points. The pro-life Christie has repeatedly dodged suggestions of his presidential aspirations, saying on Election Day he was focusing on governing the state of New Jersey for the next 4 years. And in Virginia, Ken Cuccinelli, the pro-life attorney general of that state and fierce opponent of Obamacare, narrowly lost the governor's race to Democrat Terry McAuliffe. McAuliffe was up by double digits in polls before Election Day. It is assumed that the negative public reaction to Obamacare closed the gap in the days leading up to the election, but not enough to help Cuccinelli. He lost the race 48 to 45%, with a third-party candidate drawing nearly 7% of the vote. And a few court cases in the news this week. The U.S. Supreme Court heard arguments on Wednesday about the role of religion in government. The case at hand involves prayer at the start of a town council meeting. The justices considered an appeals court ruling that found the town of Greece, New York, had violated the Constitution because nearly every prayer in an 11-year span was overtly Christian. The appellate court said that amounted to an endorsement of Christianity. Greece is being backed by the Obama administration and by many social and religious conservative groups in arguing that the court settled this issue 30 years ago, when it said that prayer in the Nebraska legislature did not violate the First Amendment's clause barring the establishment of religion. A decision is expected by June. And there was another ruling on the HHS contraception mandate this week. The U.S. Circuit Court in Washington, D.C. overturned a lower court ruling that said the religious rights of the owners of Freshway Foods in Ohio were not being violated. The two owners, brothers Frank and Phil Gilardi, filed suit against the mandate, arguing that being forced to offer contraception, sterilization, and abortifacient drugs in employee health plans violated their rights. The appellate court rejected the Obama administration argument that the Gilardis' religious rights were not burdened, since they would have to pay the contraceptive coverage. Instead, the court ruled that the Gilardis' free exercise rights occur when they fill the basket of goods and services that constitute a health care plan. Given the contradictory nature of the rulings from various circuit courts, these HHS cases will likely be referred to the Supreme Court for final review. And gay rights is gaining ground on several fronts. On Thursday, the U.S. Senate approved a bill outlawing workplace discrimination against gays, bisexuals, or transgendered individuals. The final tally was 64 to 32, with all 55 Democrats voting for the legislation. Republican Senator Dan Coats of Indiana warned such a law would force some employers to violate their religious beliefs. Ultimately, an amendment sponsored by Republican Senator Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania that would have expanded a religious exemption was rejected. The bill's chances in the Republican-controlled House appear dim. Speaker John Boehner has maintained his long-standing opposition to the measure, arguing that it's unnecessary and certain to create costly, frivolous lawsuits for businesses. And the state of Illinois is on its way to legalizing gay marriage. In a 61 to 54 vote, the State House of Representatives altered the definition of marriage to include same-sex couples. The Chicago Tribune reported that several undecided Catholics voted for the bill because of recent statements about homosexuals made by Pope Francis. House Speaker Michael Madigan even paraphrased the Pope in explaining his vote, saying of gay couples, "Who am I to judge that they should be illegal?" Pope Francis in July said, "If a person is gay and seeks God and has goodwill, who am I to judge him?" Democrat Governor Pat Quinn, a Roman Catholic, has long supported the measure and confirmed he will sign the bill into law. The state Senate passed the measure in February. And Ireland will soon consider the legal redefinition of marriage. The government is planning a referendum scheduled for early 2015. Justice Minister Alan Shatter introduced the referendum at a cabinet meeting on Monday. A government spokesman said Prime Minister Enda Kenny would be actively supporting the measure. And it's being called the Medjugorje bombshell. In a letter delivered to the U.S. bishops, the Vatican has repeated its instruction that the Catholic faithful are not to participate in events which presume the authenticity of the apparitions of the Virgin Mary in Medjugorje. By way of background, in 1981, the Blessed Virgin purportedly appeared to 6 children in the former Yugoslavian town. Some of the 6 visionaries continue reporting apparitions to this day, and belief in the apparitions is accepted among millions of faithful. Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, the Apostolic Nuncio in Washington, delivered the Vatican message in late October on behalf of Archbishop Gerhard Müller, the head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith in Rome. The letter specifically notes that one of the so-called visionaries of Medjugorje was scheduled to appear at parishes across the U.S. with a billing of more apparitions during these events. Archbishop Mueller reminded the American bishops that the Vatican investigation of the Medjugorje phenomena continues, but in the meantime, the faithful are to accept the 1991 finding of the Yugoslavian bishops. They said it is not possible to state that the Medjugorje events were apparitions or supernatural revelations. The scheduled parish events with one of the Medjugorje seers has since been canceled. I've posted a link to the letter on my Facebook page. And finally, a friend of EWTN and the World Over Live can no longer be called Mrs. or Doctor. She's a lady. Pope Francis has named Catholic teacher, author, and philosopher Alice von Hildebrand a Dame Grand Cross of the Equestrian Order of St. Gregory. Cardinal Raymond, prefect of the Apostolic Signatura, bestowed the honor upon Lady Hildebrand at an October 30th gala in New York. The occasion marked her 90th birthday. The Pope granted her the honor to acknowledge von Hildebrand's outstanding service to the Church. We wish Lady Alice a very happy 90th birthday and congratulations on her well-deserved honor. When we return, those of you with children in Catholic schools, be sure to stick around. We'll discuss the controversial Common Core curriculum with Patrick Riley of the Cardinal Newman Society and Professor Anthony Esolen of Providence College, and our exclusive interview with Bill O'Reilly when the World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. In October, over 100 professors and university administrators wrote a letter to the Catholic bishops, urging them to protect Catholic schools from the controversial education guidelines known as the Common Core. Proponents of these guidelines say they establish basic standards for students in kindergarten through 12 that will prepare them for college and a career. Critics say the Common Core lowers the bar of achievement in school and basically ignores literature, philosophy, and classic moral teaching. Who is advancing the Common Core, and why is it being pushed so aggressively into the Catholic school system, which has been outperforming the public schools for years? Here to comment is the president of the Cardinal Newman Society, Patrick Riley, and via satellite from Rhode Island, Professor Anthony Esolen of Providence College, one of the signatories of the letters to the U.S. bishops. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. I want to start with you, Patrick. What is this Common Core? Where did it come from, and why is it suddenly being thrust upon the Catholic schools?
It's something that's been entirely funded by the Gates administration, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, which, as Catholics, we know has done many reprehensible things with regard to contraception and abortion throughout the world. The Common Core is essentially, as the NCEA has said, is a fundamental shift in what is being taught and how we teach in Catholic schools. It's an attempt to turn education to the lowest common denominator so that students are prepared for entry-level jobs or first year in community colleges. Yeah, that's really where the benchmark is set.
But the USCCB and those, even people in Catholic education are saying, and this is a quote from the USCCB, Catholic schools are not bound by these standards. It's a bottom minimal requirement. So why are you so upset about this?
Because it's something that we don't want, and it's something that we don't need. We don't want it because Catholic schools, our Common Core is the Catholic faith. The reason we set standards, the reason we have certain curricular decisions and how we teach is all based on our faith. It's all about formation of students, not about fundamentally about getting them into entry-level positions.
Professor Esolen, you have been a critic of this. You were one of the signatories of this letter. In testimony against this, you said that the Common Core has a contempt for the great works of human art and thought in literary form. We're forming the minds and hearts of men and women. What is your huge beef with this Common Core?
It's unfit for human consumption. We can call it the inhumanities. What it essentially does, and by the way, it does this from the top down because all of this is going to be driven by the assessments at every level. See, they're not bottom standards so much as things to be attained or tasks to be completed. Otherwise, you're not going to get your money. it turns literature and art, all of the arts, but I'm thinking particularly of literature, into subject matter for students to pretend to say clever things about, so that they can write a report when they're mid-level managers at Lehman Brothers or something like that. It's not an engagement with literature as a source of wisdom, literature that points us towards what is true and good and beautiful. And I can't think of a quicker way to get students to detest literature and the humanities than to turn it into this sort of thing. It's completely utilitarian.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, in reading some of your critiques of this, it reduces the study of the classics and totally pushes aside the fictional narrative. And this teaches us how to be human, in my estimation. And I know, and we should say, you are renowned for an exemplary translation of Dante's Divine Comedy, which I would recommend to our viewers. Pat, why, given what we've just heard from the professor, why are more than 100 dioceses already signed on to this core curriculum?
Well, for one thing, we're not sure of that number. That is the number that's been put out, but we're looking at it, and we've only been able to see about 50 that have actually signed on to it. So that is somewhat hopeful. And many of them are not 100% in line with this. So we've been encouraging them to pause and take a closer look at this. Why are they doing it? Some of them think that they'll get more state funding. Many of them were simply duped into thinking that this is a good thing for Catholic education, when in fact what it's doing is moving, as Anthony said, moving further away from the classical education basis that Catholic education has always reached for and has always been the reason why Catholic schools always, in all of the testing, outperform public schools.
Is it that you fear that this will have a secularizing influence in some way, that it will tamp down or somehow trample on the philosophical core as well as the moral thrust of certain parts of the Catholic education?
Yes, well, certainly. As you move further and further toward technical writing and moving away from learning the classics of literature, and as you get into fuzzy math and away from true logic, you certainly move away from a classical education.
Anthony Esolen, your take on that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Why would you read a great work of literary fiction? And you have to read it. You have to read it slowly. You have to savor it. Why would you read that if the object is to perform some task upon it, to write a formulaic paper with footnotes and all of this? It's drudge work, preparing the students for drudge work. It seems that the people who come up with these standards have forgotten that these are children, and that children are human beings with souls.
Yeah, well,
and why the Catholics would go along with this, I have no idea.
Yeah, well,
if they wanted to take a cue, why not take a cue from those upstart new Catholic schools that have classical curricula that actually work?
Yeah, and that's thriving and seems to be having an incredible impact. Now, Pat Riley, you all just did a poll of top high schools in the nation. You did a poll of the principals and whether they wanted this core curriculum or not. What did you find?
That's right. We have a Catholic high school honor roll that recognizes top Catholic schools throughout the country, and they overwhelmingly have great concerns about the impact of Common Core. Many of them do not know enough about it yet, so they're hesitant. They either want the church to pause and take a closer look at this and not rush into it, or very large majority, large numbers, 48% actually said that they absolutely will not do not want this in their schools. So
they think it will harm the schools, 48%.
They think it will harm their schools.
13% said it might improve.
That's right. And so, why anyone would be pushing this on Catholic schools when, as you said, it is absolutely not required for.
Okay, I want to share this with both of you. The National Catholic Education Association has issued a statement. Here's what they say. The Common Core represents a fundamental shift in the teaching and learning process. The Common Core establishes clear, measurable goals for students that assist teachers in making instructional decisions. The standards place emphasis on creativity, Professor Esolen, critical and analytical thinking, and application to curriculum content. The Common Core is not a national curriculum. It guides the way that instruction takes place in each classroom, allowing the Catholic school to develop its own curriculum content. What's wrong with that, Professor Esolen?
Everything is wrong with that. Teaching is an intensely personal thing. nobody from on high can presume to determine how a teacher should be instructing his or her students in her class. It depends upon what that teacher is excited by. And critical thinking skills, my gosh, you go through those Common Core standards, it's just a thicket of jargon and bloviating self-important vagueness. They can't write themselves, and they're purporting to teach us critical. They're not critical about themselves. It's complete nonsense.
I want to go to Pat Riley. Pat, you all broke a story this week that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation apparently is funding the National Catholic Education Association vis-a-vis this Common Core. What's the story here? Well,
they received a grant of over $100,000 in order
to do what?
To train teachers and to teach them to use the Common Core in the classrooms. And as far as I know, the NCEA is not a teacher training business or organization. You know, it's rather disingenuous that on the one hand they try to play this down as not affecting curriculum and such, and yet in their statement, official statement on the Common Core, they said that the Common Core represents a fundamental shift in teaching and learning in our schools. And
so what's the end?
Why do we need that?
What's the end game here? Why are the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation contributing $150 million they've contributed to the overall Common Core agenda here?
Right.
What is the end game? What do they hope to achieve, and why are they trying to push it through Catholic schools?
It's all about nationalizing education.
To what end?
And Catholic schools represent the largest block of schools that fundamentally have an objection in the way that they have done things over the past centuries with the Common Core. And if they can coerce Catholic schools to accept the Common Core, it's done. Our nation will have one plan. It's an experimental plan. It's not tested. It's not proven that this will even work. And it wipes out all opportunities for future innovation in states and in the Catholic schools because we're all doing the same thing.
Anthony Esolen, what impact do you think this will have, should it be adopted by Catholic institutions, on the humanities as well as the way in which the faith is imparted via history, science, etc.?
It's complete madness. Its end game is to produce thoroughly secular, soulless functionaries in the post-industrial state. That's all. I really can't. Words fail me. I don't know how to describe the NCEA other than to say that they are either populated by complete blockheads who've never themselves encountered a great work of literature with humility and gratitude, or they're knaves.
Oh boy.
And they're lying through their teeth.
Okay, we will leave it there. Gentlemen, I thank you both for being here. This is a story we will continue to monitor. I'd like to hear your experience with the Common Core standards at your child's school, perhaps. Email us your stories at worldover@EWTN.com. We will be following up. Anthony Esolen's 10 Ways to Destroy the Imagination of Your Child is available at bookstores everywhere and online, as is his extraordinary translation of Dante's Divine Comedy. And where can we find the Cardinal Newman Society?
At the CardinalNewmanSociety.org.
Very good.
Feel free to, we'll keep reporting on all the developments.
Pat Riley, thanks for being here. Professor Anthony Esolen. When we return, best-selling author and Fox News host Bill O'Reilly joins us in my no-spin zone to talk about killing Jesus when the World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. For 17 years, his O'Reilly factor has dominated the ratings in cable news. As if that weren't enough, he's become one of the world's best-selling authors. His latest book, Killing Jesus, is currently #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. Some have criticized the book for its depiction of Christ's ministry and last days. We talked at length recently about why he wrote Killing Jesus, the criticism, and even his personal faith. Here's my exclusive interview with Bill O'Reilly. Bill, why was it necessary, after hearing and seeing this story told in so many ways, in so many mediums, why did you feel compelled to write this book now?
Well, I don't think it's ever been put together in a historical sense the way we did it, contrasting the Roman occupation and what was happening in Rome to the early life of Jesus. We begin with him actually being hunted by Herod. And I don't think, I have never seen it, and believe me, we went over everything that was written about Jesus. It all brought together the history of it. And it amazes me, now that we've sold about 700,000 copies, and I get a lot of letters, how little people know about Jesus unless they come from a religious family. If you're not raised in a religious family, you don't know anything about him. You know he's born on Christmas, and you know he got nailed to the cross. But in between, you don't know anything.
It's lost.
Yeah.
Why separate the spiritual from the human? This is really the historical record, the human side of Jesus. The spiritual you kind of leave to the side. It's there, it's in footnotes, it's on the edges. But why not tackle the whole enchilada?
Because I'm not really qualified to write a spiritual book. That's not what I do. I'm a historian. So I just didn't feel that another spiritual book about Jesus coming from me would have done anybody any good.
Yeah, you said the Holy Spirit inspired you to write this book.
Because that's my belief system, not the specific book, in the sense that I believe that there's an interactive God, as all Christians and Catholics believe, that God takes an interest in every human being, and that good things, inspiration, come from God. So I just clearly stated that, and then the secularists and atheists went wild trying to diminish me, but that's a core tenet of the Christian belief system. And certainly this book, because I was struggling, what do I write after Lincoln and Kennedy? What do I do? And then all of a sudden, bing, it just came in. And so I attribute that to the Holy Spirit.
I want to get into some of the issues you raise in the book. Some of my viewers have sent me emails since I appeared on your show. You've got to ask Bill O'Reilly this, so I will. Mary Magdalene, in the book, she is depicted as a prostitute. Now, that is a part of the Christian tradition. Recent scholarship and history would seem to indicate she's not a prostitute. Why do you all put her in that, cast her in that way?
We didn't believe the recent scholarship was based on anything compelling. We saw it, but the town where she came from was a notorious town for vice. And she was an outcast in the town. Do the math.
Yeah.
Do the math.
And the demons were cast out of her, the scripture
Well,
says.
whatever, I mean, I'm not going into the spiritual realm. The math was young single woman, unmarried. Very rare. Not accepted. Why? From a town that specialized in vice. So we believe that the historical portrayal of Mary Magdalene is accurate, and that Jesus took her as part of his entourage to show everyone that he was going to engage everybody. And of course, Mary Magdalene became one of his most loyal acolytes.
Yeah. Let's talk for a moment about the way the story unfolds here. You have the opening of his ministry being the turning of the tables in the temple, turning all the money changers' tables over.
Right.
That happens in 3 of the Gospels at the end of the ministry, not at the beginning. Why do you put it there? In one of the Gospels, it's situated earlier, but not where you all have it.
We believe it happened twice.
Twice.
All right? From the narrative that we saw in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and the Roman reports of this man who's disrupting, that's the word that they used, disrupting, all right, society in Jerusalem. We believe that early on, he confronted these people in the temple, the merchants and the money changers. Right. And then, of course, in the last 7 days, he replicated that, and that sealed his doom.
I got an email the other day. This lady wrote on page 214, Bill O'Reilly writes, Judas Iscariot watches Jesus with a quiet intensity. How do you know that, Bill O'Reilly?
The descriptions of how Judas behaved as one of the disciples are pretty vivid, coming from John the evangelist, who was there. John was, right? And Judas was an outsider, as we write in the book. Right. He wasn't part of the Galilee crew. He came from the south, spoke differently, and he was the treasurer, and he was a calculating man. So we basically took from what has been written about Judas and described it in a way that we believe he was calculating. Okay, and we say that, if Jesus is God, they can't get him.
Right.
They can't get him. He'll call the legions of angels down, and it'll protect him. But if he isn't, I, Judas Iscariot, want to be on the right side of this, so I'll cooperate with the temple authorities. That way I can't lose. And I think we depicted Judas the way he really was.
Okay. On the cross, Jesus, in your account, he says, I thirst. He says, it is finished. But he doesn't say, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. Why not? Why did you decide that? If he can muster the breath to say, I thirst, couldn't he have possibly said, Father, forgive them? I know not what they do.
It's possible, but we don't think it was probable. Number one, you couldn't hear him. The bystanders were kept far away, so they wouldn't have been able to hear him. The only people who could hear anything Jesus said were the Roman execution squad, the 5 of them. We know he said he was thirsty because they put a sponge to his mouth. Right. We know that, okay? And it is finished, we believe he could have said. But anything more than that, because he was like this, and you die on the cross by suffocation, all your energy has to be getting air into your lungs. To have a conversation is virtually impossible. Maybe 1 or 2 words. But we weren't sure, so we just left it out. When we're not sure, we don't put it in.
What is this whole, I mean, this had to be you say it's it was the most daunting of the books.
Very tough to write it.
What has it meant to you as a Catholic, personally, and has it deepened or changed your faith at all?
Hasn't changed my faith. I was always a loyal Catholic. That's the way I was raised. But certainly when you look at the 2 things that are phenomenal in the book, that strengthens anybody who's a Christian. Number one, why were thousands of people following this guy around?
Yeah.
Why? There were a lot of people saying they were the Messiah at that time, a lot. Yet thousands, literally thousands of people would show up. And there was no advertising campaign. There was no plane going over. Jesus will be on the Mount at 3 p.m. Word of mouth.
No tweets.
Right. Word of mouth was driving people who had to eat, had to work to eat, to follow him. Number one. And that's indisputable.
Right.
All right. Number 2, most famous man who ever lived. Had no money, no infrastructure, nothing. How does that happen? So those 2 things we establish very clearly in the book. And so that if you do believe in Jesus, that he was God, I think that strengthens the belief that there was something extraordinary going on there.
Years ago at one of the conventions in Minneapolis, I wandered into a cathedral, and I hope I'm not revealing anything. It was in public, so I think I can reveal it. I walked in, it was an empty cathedral, and there in the front is Bill O'Reilly in prayer.
And you didn't even know me, right?
I didn't know you at all.
You know who I was from TV.
I knew you were from TV, and I saw you from afar. And I thought to myself, I mean, you said a moment ago I was raised that way. The fact is you practice your faith.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't like to wear that on my sleeve, Raymond. I mean, I'm the biggest sinner on the block. I mean,
welcome to my club.
If I see a nice cathedral, I stop in and say a prayer. I mean, but I'm not saying that I'm some kind of holy roller, and I'm not trying to proselytize in this book. I took this book on the same way I took on Lincoln and Kennedy. I just want to portray the subject vividly and accurately, and I believe I succeeded.
What do you say to those, USA Today and some others who've taken some shots at the book? They say nothing new is revealed here, Bill O'Reilly.
No, it's a lie. I mean, you're a scholar of theology. Is that description true?
Well, I don't think it's true. I mean, I actually,
But
there was
I mean,
new
you know what
material. Yeah, there was new material here.
I'll put forth that Raymond Arroyo knows more than Bob Minsheimer about Jesus. I'll put that
with
forth.
apologies to Bob.
I'm not apologizing to him.
Okay. Well,
they do that to diminish the book. The secularists don't want people to read Killing Jesus because it heightens the awareness of Jesus. Yeah. And they see Jesus as a threat to their agenda of abortion or gay marriage, whatever it may be. So they want Bill O'Reilly selling 3 million copies of Killing Jesus, the last thing they want. So they're going to, there's nothing new in the book, which is a bunch of garbage. There's tons new in the book, all right? And the other thing is the diminishment of me because I said, well, I got inspired by the Holy Spirit. Yeah. Is that an outrageous statement for a Christian?
People have been saying that for centuries, from Michelangelo to the lady on the corner.
They think it's outrageous because they actually believe that there's a God, and they don't. So therefore, look at this guy. Look at how crazy he is. They both tried those tacks, and they both lost.
In the back of the book, there was something that I found interesting. It says at one point, several of the artwork featured from the collection of Bill O'Reilly.
Right.
Do you collect religious art?
Not religious art so much as historical art. I have some of it's religious, particularly because of this period of time, but it's mostly historical stuff that I collect. But some of the things we have in there are from my private
Beautiful
collection.
pieces. It's Jesus teaching in the temple. I thought,
Yeah.
oh, I'd love to see that one
It is.
in the O'Reilly gallery.
It's a beautiful old thing that I picked up somewhere. I don't even remember where. But I tried to give a lot of myself in the book, but without beating anybody over the head with it.
Do you enjoy this day in and day out, Bill? This is a hard gig, doing a show every night for 17 years. Congratulations, you just passed your mark. Do you ever tire of this?
Sure. I get tired of doing it. Some days are good, some days are bad. There's a lot of madness surrounding what I do, both in a political commentary and writing the books. And sometimes it wears you down. Yeah. But I'm a big boy. I get well paid for it. I think I'm here on earth for a reason. I told 60 Minutes that I think I was put here for a reason. I'm trying to do the best I can with the talents that God gave me. I think I'm succeeding, but it's not easy. But anything, look, anything worthwhile, they say.
And you take some shots for it.
Yeah, I take the shots, but I give the shots too. I mean, I'm not like...
I noticed.
I'm not a real turn the cheek guy, which said, I'm the biggest hitter on the block. I'll turn the cheek if I believe that the shot is inadvertent or, like Jesus said, and we believe that he did say, Father, forgive them, but we don't believe he said it on the cross. We believe he said it.
He said it earlier?
When he was scourged and being beaten. All right, when it was overheard, okay, but I could be wrong about that. But anyway, if it's an inadvertent shot at me, I'll ignore it. But if I think if it's an evil shot and it's done to demean not only me but my belief system, I'm coming at you.
Tell me about the success of this show and the amazing success it has had over these 17 years. #1 in cable. I attribute it, looking in, to the way you choose your stories each night and the way you frame them. Many other shows, they seem to be repeating each other. Not this program. What is the secret to choosing those topics from what you find when you land in the morning and framing them in a way that will excite that audience and hold them?
Well, I think there's an authenticity to the factor that people know I'm not a phony. I mean, you like me, you don't like me, whatever. I'm not trying to pander to anybody. I think people know that. #2, I hang with regular folks. I mean, I'm not running with the swells, all right? So working class people are who I interact with on a daily basis. And I want to reflect their concerns every night. So when I see a story, I say, are the folks interested in this story, or is it some pinhead thing they're doing like that? And I think my instincts are good. My mother still lives in the same house that I was raised in, Levittown. I try to move her out of there. She didn't want to go. I go back every Sunday to see her. I've talked with the folks. I know what their concerns are. So we reflect that on the program, and I think that working people and people steeped in Judeo-Christian tradition who believe that makes a country strong, I think they know that I'm with them. And so there's a loyalty there, and that kind of explains our success.
Pope Francis, and I'll give you the final word, as you would say. What do you make of him? Is he changing the church, or is this a new face of continuity?
I don't know yet about Pope Francis. I kind of like him. I mean, he seems to me to be a humble man who wants to do good. Let's start there. Humble man, he doesn't have to be. He's in an exalted position, and he wants to do good. And his whole history kind of shows that, right? All right. So right away, we start with that baseline of respect. I respect that. #2, he's smart because he understands that the message of the Catholic Church has to come from somebody who non-believers will listen to. Catholic Church is a damaged institution, damaged all over the world. He's trying to be the messenger that is acceptable. So therefore, he's saying, look, we're not the judgmental people here. We want everybody to listen to us, all right? And we're not going to, condemn the gays, and we're not going to do this and alienate these people. We're going to be more accepting. This is a smart move because the more people listen, the more they might believe. But if they're not going to listen at all,
there's no opportunity.
There's no hope. So to me, he's a good man. I could be wrong about that, but it looks like he's a good man.
Sure.
All right? And he's a smart guy for opening up the message to everyone, which is what I believe Jesus would have done. Can I tell you a quick story?
Sure, please.
All right. I had a run-in with a cleric, a nun, all right, couple of years ago, and that nun did a bad thing.
What did she do?
I'm not going to tell you.
She did it publicly or privately?
No, privately.
Okay.
She did a bad thing, all right? And I knew it, and she knew it. And I looked her in the eye, and I said, you think Jesus would have done that? Now, we're all sinners, as I said. But this one knew. This one was calculating and wasn't, oh, it was a bad thing, and I'm sorry.
Yeah.
No. And I think that that's the litmus test for all of the quote-unquote spokespeople for the Catholic Church. Would Jesus do that? Would he act that way? And with the Mary Magdalene story, going back to that, his message was quite clear. We're going to embrace everybody here.
There's a possibility of redemption for everybody.
Right. We're not going to be making judgments and alienating. And I think that's what Pope Francis wants to do.
What's the next book? They say World War II.
Yeah.
If I guess it, will you tell me?
No, because if I tell you what the next book is, Raymond, then someone will steal it.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
So there's a lot of stealing going on. It's a big World War II book. Everybody thinks they know what happened in World War II. You don't.
And it's killing somebody.
Yeah, they're killing. It'll be killing in the title. And we're working on it now, and boy.
A humdinger.
It's another one. It's not going to top Jesus. Jesus will be the best-selling book I ever write. I'm pretty
Bigger
sure.
than Bold Fresh.
Jesus will be the biggest book by far.
Wow.
Yeah. And but we're going to write good history books as long as we can.
The New York Times #1 bestseller, Killing Jesus, A History by Bill O'Reilly with Martin Dugard, is available at bookstores everywhere and online. When we return, our Unseen Hero segment, Dr. Jeni Stepanek is here to talk about how she dealt with the loss of her 4 children and the faith that sustains her today, as well as the honor recently bestowed on her son, Mattie Stepanek. The World Over Live continues in a moment. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. In the days following All Saints, All Souls Day, my thoughts went to Jeni Stepanek's 4 children. All 4 were taken by a rare form of muscular dystrophy. Mattie Stepanek, the prolific poet, peace advocate, and philosopher, lived to his 14th year. He captured the hearts of media figures and the public alike. Oprah Winfrey, Larry King, Jimmy Carter, countless others were touched by the purity of his message and the faith that informed it. His mother, Jenny, began a foundation to extend his message, and she herself is a courageous example of living and loving beyond disability and even terrible loss, and a true unseen hero, or perhaps a partially unseen hero. Here's my conversation with Dr. Jeni Stepanek. Now, Jenny, in your book, Messenger, you describe this time as pumpkin season. It was not always a happy time. It isn't a happy time.
No, it's very difficult. Mattie's brother, Jamie, died the week after Halloween. And while that didn't mean anything to me, Mattie's memory was that we went to a funeral, we went to a cemetery, we buried his brother, and we came home and threw out the pumpkins that were rotting on the side porch. And I didn't know this for several years, but what I did notice was that every year, my happy, delightful child would become miserable during the fall, and he just seemed to miss Jamie more and more. And then he finally explained pumpkin season to me, that as soon as he saw pumpkins, he began thinking of his brother. And it was in exploring pumpkin season that we began realizing, you know, the depth of his emotions and how he started creating his poetry and short stories.
Yeah, it is interesting that from that grief, that really is the kernel, the seed that Heart Songs and everything else springs from, his entire message. Tell us how that happened.
After Jamie died, one of the things that I did to help Mattie cope was I sat down and I actually wrote a little book with him called The Story of a Very Special Brother, where I asked Mattie questions. You know, what do you remember, and what do you feel, and how do we act when we feel these different ways? And Mattie realized that in sharing words and in expressing emotions in a way that helped you feel better but didn't hurt others, that's how you moved forward and could celebrate life even in spite of pain and loss. And by the time he was 3, Mattie was creating his own short stories and poetry, which he called heart songs. When he was about 5 years old, he started calling them that. But they were all born out of grief.
There is that wonderful poem that he wrote, and he was very small when he wrote it. Matties like to touch pumpkins and toys. So Matties touch them. But Matties can't touch Jamies anymore, even if they want to. So Matties touch their tears instead.
Yes.
How old was he when he wrote that?
I think he was about 3. And that's an excerpt of a longer poem where he lists all the things that he likes to touch and what he can and can't touch. But he was really grieving his brother. And I think that was around the time that I began realizing the significance of pumpkin season.
I have always been so impressed by you and the way in which you have not only, in many ways, overcome your disability by your will and your spirit, but the way you've coped with such grief. I mean, you know, I lost a grandmother this summer, and it was traumatic. I cannot imagine losing 4 children. How do you cope? Where do you go for the strength to go on? And how do you get past that feeling that you just want to stay in your room and never come out?
Oh, I feel that. You don't ever overcome grief. I know that when you mentioned overcome this disability, this disability will take my body down, but I can still live with an attitude of making a difference with the moments that I've got in the way that I can. Honestly, Raymond, I don't think that a day goes by that I don't cry, that I don't touch my tears, as Mattie said. But I don't get stuck in the misery. I think it matters that people realize that if you're grieving, you're grieving. You have to move through that. You have to process it. And sometimes how I move through is just simply I make a choice. I make myself stop thinking about the what ifs. What if is an abyss? You know, what if I'd have done this? What if I'd have done that? Sometimes I pray. I get strength from God. And sometimes I'm so miserable that as spiritual as you are, you can't feel God's presence, so you allow other people to be the reflection of God for you. You either reach out to help them with something that they need, which moves you past the moment of misery.
Right.
Or you allow them to reach in and help you with something that you need. But you move from attitude to action. The hardest part is the attitude. And it is not easy. I've mentioned to you before Mattie's challenge to me. Choose to inhale. Don't breathe simply to exist. That's profound, and it sounds simple, but it's not an easy choice to embrace an attitude of hope, and hope anchored in faith. But it's a worthy choice, and it's the one that gets us through the toughest times.
Well, and it's allowed you to continue Mattie's message, and you really have held this torch for 10 years now. And the message continues. You established a foundation that continues his message of peace, his message of hope, of faith. We have a little excerpt, and you just shared this with me, and I love this. Tell us where this is from. And this is the first time people are seeing this.
Right. This is something I've kept private, not putting it up on YouTube. Mattie, this was actually at Mattie's very last book signing.
Wow.
We didn't know it was his last book signing, but he was in a bookstore, and a Native American group came from Wisconsin, a group called Call for Peace. And they had been given 10 minutes with the Nobel Peace Laureates to share whatever message they wanted about hope and peace during an upcoming meeting in Rome. And they offered the 10 minutes to Mattie. And Mattie said, how about, that's very, you know, humbling, and I'd love it, but how about we split the time? And so they decided they'd each take 5 minutes. Mattie was completely unprepared, but they said, you have 5 minutes, go. And Mattie said, give me 30 seconds to organize my thoughts. And the video that I shared with you today was the 5 minutes that Mattie sent to Rome.
Here's a little excerpt. Take a look. Mattie Stepanek.
As you can tell from my poetry, I believe that peace is possible because peace is an attitude, and an attitude is a choice. Everything in life is a choice. even if the only choice we have to make is the attitude with which we embrace each moment. And so, like everything in life, peace is an essential choice that we must make. And peace can be achieved if we choose to live 3 simple steps. First, we must choose to make peace an attitude. We must want it and make it something that truly matters in our hearts and in our lives. For if we say it, but we don't feel it, it is empty and it will not happen. And then we must choose to make peace a habit. We can't just think it and then it happens. We have to live it and demonstrate it. We have to make it a part of our everyday lives. Have peace in everything we do, at home, at work, everywhere, at all times. We must think gently, speak gently, and live gently. And then we must finally choose to make peace a reality. We must share it and spread it throughout the world. We can't just live it in ourselves and among friends and family, the people we know and trust. We have to go throughout the world to people we know and don't know, even people we disagree with. And we must dedicate peace to ourselves and to the world. And so, in choosing to make peace an attitude, a habit, and a reality, one day it will be achieved.
He is inspiring. I can't believe he didn't write that out.
No. And I don't know what he wrote. He wrote 3 words on a piece of paper. And you can see in the video that he looks down once or twice. But I don't know what it was, because when he was done, he threw the paper out. And I didn't think to say, oh, can I have that piece of paper? What inspired this comment? But honestly, those 3 choices for peace are the anchor, the root of everything that we're doing with Mattie's foundation. That's the message that we're taking forward.
We should also say the National Catholic Partnership on Disability recently awarded Mattie this Youth Leadership Award. Tell us what that means to you.
It's amazing. One of the big things is Mattie was so young when he died. It would be so easy for his life, his message, his contributions to life to be lost with his youth, to fade away quickly. It would also be quick and easy for people to say, oh, Mattie Stepanek, he wrote Heart Songs poetry, and to leave him as a child poet. But really his poetry was how he shaped the message that God placed in his heart. So his poetry is about purpose. It's about hope. It's about peace. So NCPD recognizing Mattie posthumously is an amazing honor, and helps people reconnect perhaps with Mattie. Maybe reopen one of those books and say, I'm looking for hope. Where is hope? And where is God in misery? Where is God in celebration? So I'm grateful that they selected Mattie.
And full disclosure, I should say, I'm a member of the Mattie JT Stepanek Guild, which is exploring and investigating his life for a possible cause of sainthood. And we will be bringing you much more on that front in the days ahead. Jeni Stepanek, thank you so much for being here and being the inspiration you are.
Thank you, Raymond.
It's incredible. For more on Mattie Stepanek and his amazing life and the foundation, visit MattieOnline.com. Be sure to pick up Jeni Stepanek's book, Messenger, The Legacy of Mattie JT Stepanek and Heart Songs. It's at bookstores everywhere and online. It's a stunner. You don't want to miss it. Before we leave you, let's cut to the chase. Tonight I want to talk about fantasies and facts, important distinctions to be made, particularly when discussing religious coverage. A few weeks ago, the press was rhapsodizing about the possibility of Pope Francis creating female cardinals at the next consistory. Since there is no explicit prohibition on red-hatting the non-ordained, why not, they suggested. A Jesuit theologian at Boston College even went so far as to circulate a list of potential female eminences. When a reporter called for my take, I told him If I were a lady, I'd hold off on buying the full-length red gown and matching heels. He was surprised. And lest you doubt your humble correspondent's instincts, this week, Vatican spokesman Father Federico Lombardi addressed the female cardinal chatter. He said, "This is just nonsense. It is simply not a realistic possibility, and Pope Francis will not name women cardinals for the February consistory. Being a cardinal is one of those roles in the church for which theoretically you don't have to be ordained, but to move from there to suggesting the Pope will name women cardinals is not remotely realistic." Then on Halloween, the National Catholic Reporter broke the story that the Vatican had asked national bishop conferences around the world to conduct a wide-ranging poll, that's what they called it, of Catholics to gather their opinions of church teaching, from contraception to same-sex marriage to divorce. The survey is actually a preparation for a synod on the family to be held next year in Rome. Now, to be fair, the reporter piece clarified that the Vatican, quote, did not request the American bishops to undertake wide consultation in their dioceses, end quote. Still, within a few hours, others had picked up the story, trumpeting an unprecedented global Vatican poll was underway. Some suggested that the Pope was opening the synod process to the laity, and that this would somehow reshape teaching when it was all over. As I told a producer at a major network, this is not a ballot initiative on doctrine, nor a lay-inclusive Vatican III. It's a fairly routine request made by any number of pontifical councils and synod general secretaries all the time. They apparently didn't believe me. So this week, the Vatican had to clarify. Hungarian Cardinal Peter Erdo, the relator for the family synod, said, "The doctrine of the magisterium must be the basis of the common reasoning of the synod. It is not a question of public opinion." What all this shows is that you have to be very discriminating when you hear a story about what the church is doing or what the Pope is saying. At times, people are just ignorant and report what they perhaps incompletely understand the facts to be. At other times, people project their own desires to transform the doctrine and practices of the church onto innocuous, even mundane stories. My advice? Don't stop at the headlines. Go to first sources and read deeply. And you know where to come if you really want to know what's going on. Well, that is all the time we have for now. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. By the way, if you sign up for the free e-blast, I'll send you exclusive content each week. You can sign up in the center of the page, RaymondArroyo.com. Be sure to tune into the program next week for a recap of the fall meeting of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. George Weigel will join us, as will former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, live. In the meantime, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. See you next time. Bye now.